Guys, welcome to Grow Up today. Today we've got a wonderful, very interesting guest, Clinton Stewart. He is one of the people that was actually released from prison after the First Step Act that President Trump signed into law, and that Republicans fought for vigorously to really bring some reform to our justice system. So, to give you a little bit of background here on Clinton Stewart's story. You may have seen a video of him leaving prison when that came out. So to give a little bit of a timeline, somebody in his group of people, his supporters, reached out to me on Twitter. They showed me the video. I thought it was incredible. I looked into his story. I read some of the documents that were available, and I read the opinion of a judge, a federal judge, who he really stood strong for Clinton and the other men that, along with Clinton, were put in prison, I believe, unjustly for what was essentially a failed business. And they tried to criminalize this. At the time, if we go backwards, they had actually gone to President Obama and tried to get clemency or a pardon or something to get these men out of prison. Obama ignored them all. And so the First Step Act has, released. Clinton's been released because of the First Step Act. And I put it out there on Twitter, and eventually the video reached the president. And we're just so thankful to have you here, first of all.
Yes, thank you. We're honored to be here.
So, I want to ask you first, the experience you've had since being released, how has the world changed? That's actually that's something I was most interested in. I want to get into your case, but how has the world changed?
Go ahead, Clint.
I think we may have lost Clinton,
but
he'll pop back on. If you want,
yep.
Yeah, he just popped back on. Give me 1 second. I'm going to actually assist getting him back on.
His audio probably wasn't working.
Yeah, his audio probably was not working.
Stand by. We'll get Clinton back on.
Stand by real quick for us to bring him back on. There he is. He's coming back. Clinton, can you
Clinton,
hear us?
Back? Can you hear us, Clinton?
Yeah, it was kind of breaking up there.
Awesome. We got him back. So, Clinton, my first question to you was, how has the world changed since you have been released from prison? Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Oh, there's some delay. Some technical.
Go ahead, Clint.
He's frozen.
Is he froze?
I think he froze. If you want, Lamont has been working with Clinton and the other men involved. If you want to give people sort of an understanding of how this all worked, basically the progression of what happened from, the Obama period to the Trump period, and sort of what your guys' viewpoint has been and how things have changed.
Well, it's been one of those things. The Just Cause organization was here to fight really for these guys. We knew these guys were not guilty of the crimes they were accused of. And as an advocacy organization, it is our position to fight wherever we find injustice. During the Obama administration, as you alluded to, they were reached out. Just Cause took several trips to Capitol Hill, talking to members of Congress. Look, there's been a very serious act of injustice that happened here. So we were able to expose a lot of people to that story. Former federal judge H. Lee Sarakin was a judge that really got involved. He was known infamously for the Hurricane Carter reversal in that case. And he began to write articles in the Huffington Post. He wrote 5 articles about the innocence of these men. Obama was sent a letter from H. Lee Sarakin telling him, in all of his years of being on the bench as a federal judge, he had never seen anything like this, nor did he ever speak on behalf of any defendants, but he knew something was wrong here. Obama never responded to a federal judge who sent that directly to the White House, as well as some members of Congress drafted a letter. Congressman Danny Davis sent a letter to the White House as well, saying, look, President Obama, this needs to be looked into. We also sent it to the Department of Justice. It went ignored. And it's sad to say, but it did. President Trump was the first person and we're so grateful to him to say, look, I'm going to do something. And that's what a lot of people like about President Trump. He's not finna waste time. Let's get these things done. And what the people cannot argue was bipartisan. These guys, and our fight for them has been for the last 7 years to bring exposure to the wrongful conviction of these men, but also the treatment that they went through in the prison system is absolutely horrific.
Yep. It's worth noting that, you know, back when Obama was president, we didn't have any progress when it came to these issues, you know, and I think that that's something that a lot of people were disappointed in. I've been open about the fact that I became a Republican after 2008. So his very first election, I think I was still one of those people who had a little bit of hope that we would see change, that we would see him go and try to really lift up minority communities and to try to, you know, right some wrongs in the justice system. And that just didn't happen. And
right.
I think that Trump, you know, he does deserve a lot of credit for getting people to the table and sort of demanding something's done. And I think that's one of the hallmarks of his presidency is when he like really goes after something getting done, they find a way to get it done.
Sure.
So, you know, I guess there's still other men involved in this case, though, that, you know, can you tell us a little bit about the men that are still in prison right now?
Is that to me, Rob?
Yeah, we lost Clinton.
Yeah, we lost Clint again.
Yeah, it may be his location where he's at. I just got to think that's the issue where they keep dropping and going. So my apologies for that.
I think it's Wi-Fi.
Yeah, there might be
Yeah,
Wi-Fi.
yeah.
If you can tell us a little bit about the case, that'd be great.
Yeah, please.
Sure. David Banks is the one that is still in the prison along with Dave Zerpolo. Those are the last two guys out of the five. The issue with David Banks is why we've been protesting. I don't know if you guys have seen what we've been doing over the last 2 weeks here. These men were actually given a date that they would be coming home, that based on the COVID-19 situation, of course, that President Trump has shown extreme concern about that. Our protest recently, that's why my voice is a little bit labored, has been at the prison because they actually are trying to keep David Banks there longer than what he's supposed to be there. And that's why we protested Clint Stewart and some other, Demetrius Harper, the two guys that are out in Kendrick Barnes, have been speaking vocally about this. And some of the stuff that's happened in the prison are acts of retaliation. So we're fighting to get David Banks out of that situation. He had a release date on the table, they took it off, said he did a three-way call, never happened. Just to give you a little backdrop of why we're pushing in harder now, because of some actions of the prison a few years ago, we feared for the safety of David Banks and his safety in that place, because another man was actually killed there that we did a story on at a Just Cause. So we were very, of course, personally touched that something needed to happen to get David out. And the most of them, we got two left. Dave Zerpolo leaves on the 26th of May. He will be free. David Banks, we're fighting hard to get that on the table, trying to get attention to President Trump and all the powers that be, BOP, everybody, to say, look, they're playing games with David Banks' life. He's not going to come out as a statistic or in a body bag. We need to set him free. That's kind of where things stand right now.
To give viewers sort of an understanding of this whole story, it's that there was a business that these men started together, and it was built around a software, correct? That you know, can you sort of give people a background on, you know, it was a software that they were planning on selling to law enforcement. They actually had hired former law enforcement onto the company. And this essentially comes from the business didn't work out. Some bills ended up not being able to be paid because the company was, you know, essentially things didn't work out, you know, and that's not a criminal. That's not criminal. Businesses fail all the time over this country. Thousands every month. I mean, just look right now during this crisis, how many businesses are going to fail right now because of this coronavirus? Businesses don't always work out. That's not you're not a criminal because they don't work out. And I think that was the most stunning thing to me is looking through the case. I know people whose businesses have failed this same sort of way, and they're not in prison. So it's something that, you know, really bothered me. And that's why I amplified the story. That's why, you know, I felt really touched by it and by, you know, basically what all of you have done to lift up Clinton and to bring him back. So Clinton, I think we've got you back now. Can you tell us how the world has changed for you since you've been released.
Oh, he doesn't hear us.
I think he's frozen again.
That's okay. We'll just.
Okay. Well, if he comes back, we'll try to bring him back on and ask him a question like immediately when he comes back on.
Well, he's speaking on,
right.
Yeah, but Lamont's speaking on Clinton's behalf, so.
Yeah, Lamont, will you tell us more, elaborate on the conditions that you're, concerned about, what's happening, that, what are they enduring in prison right now? What's going on there?
Well, it's a lot of, listen, we were contacted by a family of Michael Anderson. He's a former inmate that was there about 4 years ago. The mother called very distraught that her son was killed at the prison. The coroner stated to her, after the prison refused to tell her where the body of this man was, and I'll get to the point of why we're concerned. We got involved as an advocate because she reached out to us. We did a show on it on Blog Talk Radio. I've never seen heartbreak like that up close and personal. The prison guards went as far as to tell her, the prison officials, that they were going to go ahead and cremate the body for her. That's highly unusual, unless there's something you're trying to hide. The coroner said to her, Miss Anderson, get an attorney. Your son did not die of suicide, though the prison marked it that way. Back in 2007, 2008, there was a story at this same prison about who they called the Cowboy Gang, which was a gang of correctional officers that went about to insult and to try to kill inmates at this prison. There's a huge story on it. Some were indicted, some were convicted, others were no action happened against them. So what we said about a few weeks ago, David had a release date of May 28th, David Banks. And a week and a half ago, they snatched him up and said, you're going to the hole. Mind you, there are 20 plus people on a hold list to even go to solitary confinement for infractions. Those infractions are people having 3 and 4 cell phones that they've been, charged with having. They said David Banks made a 3-way call. The 3-way call never happened. On the recorded call, David told my mother that he was unable to make a 3-way call. The prison does not allow that, and that went to that point. So we feared for his safety. I think Clint's back, Rob. We'll get back to that if you want to.
Yeah.
Yes.
Clinton, we've got Clinton.
Go ahead, Rob.
Clinton, could you tell us how the world has changed for you since you've been released?
Oh, big time. Yeah. So, that's a good question. I'm under probationary supervision, curfewed for 15 hours on home confinement, and it's changing in a big way, but you still have that part of you that wants the rest of the men to be released. You think about yourself, you sleep in your own bed, you think about going to church, but you think about your brothers in chains who can't do that, and who are still incarcerated, sleeping on a bed that's a shelf, is not meant for humans. And so there's a part of you that just weighs heavy with that thought and with that notion and understanding, that memory that says, no, we all need to be out. So my world definitely has changed. I right before. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, what do you feel changed between President Obama and President Trump?
Well, President Trump signed the bill that got me out of prison. Yeah. I appealed to President Obama about our innocence, wrongful conviction, and he wouldn't hear us. He actually wrote my daughter back an email. She reached out to him after, a year or so, maybe a year and a half of our appeal to him. And he wrote her back in his political response saying, inmates have to serve their time. So what it said to me is he believes that I'm guilty. Yeah. And so I have a serious issue with that. I'd love to talk to him one day and ask him, did he ever look at the case Did you ever look at this thing? We were a software company. I was an executive in a software company. We were doing criminal investigation software for law enforcement. Why? What kind of crime am I looking to commit with that kind of career field? So,
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So kudos to President Trump. Thanks a lot for signing the First Step Act, and I applaud him and everybody that participated in making that happen, to have me here on home confinement, that my daughter and I could be reunited.
I was so happy to see you guys reunited. That was, I mean, it meant a lot to me seeing you released from prison. I think, you know, you look at injustices because our system's not perfect. I'm a big believer that we live in one of the greatest countries, that really the greatest country to ever exist, but we still have things that we need to fix. You know, there's still things that wrongs that need to be righted. And one of those things is, you know, should we even have white collar crimes going to prison with rapists and pedophiles and, you know, people who murder children? Is this like, does that even make sense?
Who's that quote to, Rob?
Make sense, and it shows the lack of caring on the part of the system. The people who are in charge of the Florence prison camp are the folks that are in charge of just those same folks that you talked about, rapists, pedophiles, you know, violent criminals at the medium security. And we are forced to work in medium security environments. We're forced labor in high security environments. We're forced labor at Alcatraz of the Rockies as campers. So you're spending, for 2 years, I spent, you know, 8, 12 hours at a time in forced labor in those environments behind bars when they lock those guys down. They call it the lockdown cruise. So you don't get a chance to say no. You're forced slave labor. I never got paid a dime for the labor that I had to do. So it's definitely not fair. It's not caring. It's not appropriate. And quite frankly, it's a violation of the court order that put me at minimum security detention. So I've experienced maximum security, medium security for, you know, days on end.
Wow.
Yeah, you know, it's always been my opinion that I think, like, you know, these white collar crimes, especially, I mean, you could sort of differentiate if it's like some crazy $100 billion scheme to rob people, then yes, that person should be, you know, in prison for a very, very long time. But if it's, you know, the things that some people are put in prison for on white collar crimes, if we're being real, what should really happen is, you know, maybe there's a fine that happens so that, you know, you're paying back whatever it was that, you know, there's some restitution in place. But a lot of these crimes are, a lot of times, you know, people just make mistakes and they're not even crimes. They're not intending to commit a crime. There was no sort of, you know, master plan to commit a crime. It's like, you know, I had this conversation with somebody recently where I said, you know, if they want to put you in prison, they could look at anybody's taxes and find a mistake they made at some point in the last 10 years, and they could claim it's a crime. You know, and in reality, they're not crimes. Nobody's intending to be a criminal. You know, those things are the types of things that I feel like there's no place in prison for them in the first place. There should be restitution and some sort of, you know, program to rehabilitate and make sure mistakes aren't made again in the future. But in your case, in my opinion, you guys were just straight up not guilty. It was not a crime. So, you know, now moving forward, what is your sort of priority in the years to come? How do you and how do we all sort of move to the next step in terms of doing the right thing? I think he may have frozen out there.
Well, I was doing the right thing. I'm wrongly accused of that serious-minded when I was in prison, and been abused, they've been accused, that are wrongly convicted.
I think we're
he's breaking up.
Yeah, I think we're Clinton's
wrongfully convicted.
Up, so
you should, when you get out, don't hide.
I think your audio is breaking up. You may not have heard my question. It was not how do you do the right thing going forward, but how do we all do the right thing in terms of righting the wrongs in the future? Like what can we do to make sure that what happened to you doesn't happen to somebody else?
Hey, Rob, we just lost him. I believe as an advocate. Yeah, I hear you, Rob. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I think what we have to do is, and I think what you said, Rob, makes a lot of sense. You did your homework on these guys. When you have not a perfect system, I believe it's imperative. Congress, when we met with Congress, people of Congress on Capitol Hill, Sensenbrenner, some former members that have retired since that time, they made an issue about the intent statement of bringing charges against somebody. I think that's something that we have to visit, that intent should be proven prior to bringing somebody up on charges, because it changes the equation of the charge. Did somebody set out to defraud people? Did they set out with a premeditated scheme to do what they needed to do to commit a crime? The crazy part about Clint's case and the RP5, when they were asking the judge, could they tell the jury the definition of intent? Judge Christine Arguello of the federal court here in Colorado would not allow it, but she allowed the prosecution to make a theory of their case that these men intended to do something wrong. So to your question, Rob, if intent is not on the table, then how is a jury going to know? But did they plan this? Did they simply have corporate debt and it was criminalized like it was in this case? We need to do our homework and be sure before we affect people's lives like these men's lives have been affected for the last 8 years, that we know what we're talking about. And we need judges to be accountable. And I think with what you said earlier, Rob, about President Trump, he got in there and got something done. Obama was given an opportunity. He failed to do it. We need leadership, whether it's Congress or the White House, that can say, look, we're going to make sure before we impact the lives of people like this, and then the suffering left in the collateral damage, if you will, of this wrongful conviction. Now we fight for the safety of David Banks, that he doesn't end up harmed or killed in that prison. We have to do our homework. And I think, Rob, I respect what you did. You dug in there and said, look, I'm going to take a look at this, and you found no crime. How did a prosecution or a judge allow it to go through? Those are questions we have to answer.
Yep.
Absolutely. And I think that it makes zero sense for, these white collar crimes to put them in a situation where they're dehumanized and they're alongside and equal with rapists, murderers, people that have committed violent crimes. I mean, that is I think, most common sense reform that we need at this point, is the fact that we're putting anyone who we even perceive has done something wrong, fiscally, in with violent
non-violent offenders, period, shouldn't be in with violent offenders. All it does is it creates a cycle of new crime, because when you get in the prison system, you have a non-violent offender goes in, they may have to then compromise themselves in order to be safe. They may have to join a gang, or they may have to do whatever they have to do so that they're not beat up, or so they can survive in the prison. And that can create a whole new cycle of crime that they never would have been involved in had you treated that nonviolent crime as something that could truly be rehabilitated. And I think that's my biggest gripe with the justice system, is that I don't believe that we're truly rehabilitating nonviolent offenders to the best of our ability. So I'd like, if Clinton's able to speak on that, I'd love for him to. If his audio's still out, then I'd love for Lamont to.
Okay.
I think Clinton's frozen here.
So he's frozen again. Yeah. Okay. Is he with us?
Clinton, you there?
Yeah, there's a Wi-Fi,
the system is not built for rehabilitation. It's not intended for rehabilitation in America.
Go ahead, Clinton. We can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
No, I can't.
Okay. All right, Lamont, you go ahead and take it.
Yeah, I think rehab is. I think the prison system has become pretty much a warehouse holding place, is what I believe it's become, and it becomes big business for these prisons, for the private prisons. I believe they have become big business, so they cease to rehab people, and that's at the state and the federal level. And you have people like you said, Rob, that are nonviolent. They're going to probably return to society. And then I think another question is, I don't think we deal with wrongful conviction well enough, because how do you rehab a person that didn't commit a crime?
Right.
You have, right? Then you're stuck in a situation where mentally, those that have gone through what Clint and those guys went through, they have to now readjust to society. They've been removed from it, and that's a difficult transition. So many things at play here. So I think rehab, number one, you have to have the people in situations where they are supposed to be there if they were convicted. But the abuse that goes on behind the wall, mentally when they come out, how do you bring them back? And for those people that don't have the support that Clint had and the IRP5 have, how do they survive it? Those are tough questions, very much so.
Absolutely. I can't imagine, what the families are going through too. I mean, that's such, it affects, you take out a whole family, what Clinton's family must be going through is, they're going on that journey with him. And this is why wrongful convictions, we have to have a system of checks and balances to oversee this kind of thing. The fact that you didn't get a response from the Obama administration when this case is, pretty clear that you didn't commit any offense whatsoever. There isn't that checks and balance, and it shouldn't just be one judge that gets to determine what evidence,
Well, there should have been a process to be able to prove your innocence, or to have a second look at this. And I think that's where the system failed. I think in the first place it failed because it shouldn't have been prosecuted. But the secondary failure is that there wasn't a clear process for you guys to try to correct the wrong. And I think that's a very difficult thing for a lot of people to understand, because they know about an appeals system, they know that there's different courts, and I think for people it's a little hard to understand how archaic and long this process can be, and how difficult it is, if you truly do believe you're innocent, how difficult it is to be able to have sort of an expeditious, look at your case. What have the challenges been to reintegrating back to society?
Is he with us?
This is so true. This is very true. In our case, it was highly political. We're political prisoners, essentially. But anyone taking a look at this case could easily see, what is wrong with this picture. These guys are put in prison for holding corporate debt, paying on their bills, and you're going to prosecute them in criminal charges, conspiracy, fraud. And what kind of business are they? So everybody who hears about our case reckons, you guys were competing for business with the government. Who was your competition? So it looks like a big conspiracy against us. When I tell people the government violated 38 federal laws to put me and my co-defendants in prison, that tells you right there that the things, the goals and aspirations that you're talking about, they certainly were not a part of our case.
And hey, Rob, to your question as far as the challenges facing Clint and these guys for reintegrating into society, is very difficult mentally. Trying to adjust to sitting down, as simple as going to take a shower, going to the grocery store, all the normal things that we take as normal. They now have to try to mentally come back, and not being told when they have to go to the bathroom. Or I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Shawshank, Redemption, where the guy had been locked up so long, he went to the grocery store and got a job, and he raised his hand to his boss. Can I go to the restroom? Because they call it in the prison term a state of institutionalization, where they become institutionalized that this is how things go. I think it is a tragedy. And you said one thing, Rob, I want to make this point. When somebody goes to prison wrongfully, they deal with that mental anguish by itself. Take everything else off the table because they didn't do anything. Secondly, my brother David Banks lost my sister a year and a half ago, who died suddenly of a massive brain clot. She visited David every other week, David Banks. When he qualified to leave the prison to go to that funeral, they refused to let him go. These are things and scars, and pardon my emotion. These are scars you cannot remove. He can never say goodbye to his sister. And there was no reason for the prison to put this oppression on David Banks at a camp, a model inmate for 8 years. And he wanted to see his sister, and they, as a result of retaliation against David and us for what we do, that's an adjustment he'll have to deal with when he gets out. That I never got to say goodbye to my sister. Those are very, very difficult moments. And that is why we fight as hard as we fight. The collateral damage of injustice is so huge, nobody pays attention to that. So that's challenging all by itself.
Well, I applaud, your real, you're showing us right now, how we can have empathy, because we're seeing that real emotion, and that's what people need.
There's
to
a human
see.
cost.
There's a human cost to this.
Yes.
Lastly, what can people do to find out more about this case and the people that are still wrongfully being imprisoned right now unjustly? What can we do to get involved? What website can we go to find out more about the work that you're doing to help these individuals?
Well, we're on social media. We're on Facebook. We're thankful for Rob and you guys pushing that video out. We have some new stuff. I want to have Olivia send it to you, Rob, if that's okay. I may send something to you if it's okay. Our protests have been a lot of work, but we fight for the rights of these men, that abuse does not continue behind that wall. And I would say to the people watching, and to you, Rob, and to your family, anybody you know that can do something, pass this information on. Pass our videos on to social media, on your platform, to say, look, let us cry out against this stuff. Because if we have a platform and our voice can be heard, we must let our voice be heard. I said a long time ago, in situations of injustice, no one has the right to remain silent. We must all come together and speak, and hopefully be a voice that turns the hearts of people to say, look, our system is not what you think it is. There are real people really hurting as a result of injustice in this country, and I call it the fallout of injustice, and it definitely falls under that parameter.
Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we're honored that we could give you amplify your voice in any way to help get that message out. Thanks for joining us.
And we're honored as well. We're honored that you would think of us. We appreciate it so very much.
And thank you, Clint. And we're really excited for your very bright future.
Thank you, Clinton. We wish you all the best.
Sorry, guys, I can't hear you.
Okay.
Oh, we're telling you, we wish you all the best. You have a very bright future ahead of you. We can't wait to see what you do.
Hey, we'll stay in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
So, guys, thank you for watching today. If you want to learn more about their case, I encourage you to. This is not a standalone issue. There's more cases like this of nonviolent offenders, and it's something I feel strongly they shouldn't be equated to murderers and child rapists and people who have traded in child porn. These people who, let's say in this case, it was just a failed business, and that's not, you don't put people in a cage for their business going wrong. And, the federal judge that stood up for them, he's now 90 years old, God bless him. He's dedicated so much of his own time and energy to try to do the right thing for these men. And when they came to me and I was able to look into the case, I was honestly stunned. When I got the summary of the case, I was like, oh, it's probably too good to be true, sort of thing. There's no way all of this, is actually exactly how it was. But looking at the actual documents, this is exactly what they said it was. And you just have to think how counterintuitive it is to start a business where you're hiring law enforcement to commit crimes. So it doesn't even make sense on its face. That would be the goal with their business. So I thank you guys for joining us today. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. We've never had these issues before with getting the guests off and on, but quarantine does funny things. So
thanks for bearing with us.
Thank you for bearing with us on the technical side of things.
Clinton, can you hear us? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Anything you want to say to our viewers?
All right, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Clinton.
All right,
bye-bye. Thank you guys for tuning in today. We'll put up those links so that you can check out this case in more detail. Hope you all have a great day. Bye.